Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rochester Security Summit 2024. Just a reminder, please silence your phones if you haven't done so already. We would also like to make a special note to thank our vendors for all the nice goodies at the conference and the delicious lunch. Now, that being all said, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Ben Meyer-Crosby, who will be speaking on leveling up your security, the power of gamification. Yay, let the games begin.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? I never know where microphones go near my face. So as was said, my name is Ben Meyer-Crosby, and I'm going to be talking about gamification and using that with your security program. So just a quick who I am. I've been in cybersecurity for 10 years. Risk management professional. I've done cybersecurity operations, training and awareness, incident management, kind of been across the whole board. I have my CISM, and I am based out of Portland, Oregon. A lot of people have been asking, why the heck am I here? I have family here, so that is why. And I went to RIT, so that's why I'm here. Great. So just a quick agenda. We're going to talk about why we're here, what gamification is, what we should be thinking about in regards to gamification, and then some just Q&A. To start things off too, this is one of the last sessions of the day, I brought a bag of candy. This is motivation. We're going to be talking about motivation as part of gamification, so I thought I would have to bring in some candy. So the more people talk and engage with the presentation, the more candy I'll throw at you. Okay, so why are we here? Let's start with talking about what are some of the problems that people see when it comes to security awareness training and getting people to engage with their security awareness training. If people can just kind of talk and say things that they think about when it comes to engaging with security awareness training. Anyone? What was that? Time for it, that's a big one. It's boring. Security awareness training can be boring, especially if you're using the same videos year over year. Yeah. A lot of people ask why we're doing that. Anything else? And also anyone, I'm going to put the candy down here because throwing it in this size of a room is probably not the great idea. So if people want to come grab candy as they speak, feel free to come grab candy as you speak. So those are all things that we see in our profession. Some of the other things, so like we talked about, motivation, people's motivation to do their security awareness training. Performance, so when I talk about performance, we're talking about the short-term recall. So a lot of that is like your quizzes and stuff like that at the end of your security awareness training. And then we always like to talk about retention, which is that long-term, are they actually remembering the things that we're teaching them long-term, and are they going to be using it? So in a survey that was done by Proofpoint a couple years ago, 39% of the people that responded said that they are just going through the motions of doing their security awareness training. I think all of us as security professionals in this room have turned on our security awareness training and then put it on mute and let it run in the background as we are watching our training. And then another 28% of respondents said that they can't get the user's attention. So like we were talking about, it's not interesting to those users. So these are all problems that we have in security awareness training today, and honestly through a lot of different aspects of security. I am feedbacking somewhere. Okay. Just a quick little story. We've all seen these scenarios before. So one afternoon, Jake, a customer service rep, received an email requesting patients' records, but noticed that the sender's address had an extra letter in the domain, common phishing tactic. Remembering his training, he flagged the email as suspicious and reported it to IT. So this is just a story. Keep this story in mind. We'll come back to it in a little bit, since we all kind of know how these stories play out sometimes in our organizations. So why do we do security awareness training? So as security professionals, why do we tell our users that we do security awareness training? What do people want to? So regulatory is a big reason that we do it. That's actually the first one on my list. A lot of financial services organizations, government organizations, HIPAA, all of those require some sort of security awareness training to happen. What are other reasons that we may do security awareness training? Protecting the company? Sorry, did I hear someone?
I was just saying the majority of data breaches are caused by human error.
Yeah, so we want to keep our customers' data safe. That's an important aspect of all of our jobs, whether it's regulatory or otherwise. And then we also just don't want our jobs to be harder. So doing security awareness training keeps our jobs from being harder. Next, how do we deliver training today? What are the ways that people deliver their security awareness training today? All the way back. Sorry? Quizzes. What other ways do people in their organizations today deliver their security awareness training? Threat simulations. Online videos, that's another big one. Does anyone, oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say, does anyone in the room do in-person training? So you can see these are all sorts of ways that training is delivered today. I have worked on every single one of these different versions of training. So does anyone have at their company put out like a monthly or quarterly newsletter that goes with their security awareness training? Really, no one does. Oh, you guys put out a... Okay. Do you know what your click rate is on the... Okay. Yeah, the company that I used to work for, the click rate on our, what we called the lockbox, it was our quarterly security communication, was 10%. 10% of people opened up their communications from IT, or security specifically. That is in comparison to the company newsletter, which was about 60%. So you can see clearly that there's a disparate between the security side of things and the kind of overall corporation side of things. So then 33% of companies say that they use in-person training as part of their programs. This is another statistic from Proofpoint. Only 16% of those 33% says that that methodology is effective in training. So even though 33% of companies do it, only 16% say it's actually worth their time to do the in-person trainings, which you'd think that if that was the case, you'd have less companies doing in-person training. Okay, so let's talk about gamification. What is it and what it isn't? So when we say gamification, what do people think of when they hear gamification? Here's. Yep, it does make it fun and a challenge. What do other people think of when they hear gamification? Sorry, what was that? Reward-based, yes. Okay. So there's a lot of pieces to gamification. You've got leaderboards, point systems, different levels, badges, and challenges. So these are all different things that most people will think of when it comes to gamification. Now, something that was set up here was reward-based. According to the studies, a lot of people don't think about rewards as part of the process. They think about everything that can get you to the rewards, but they don't actually think about the rewards themselves, which is an interesting thing. Because statistics show that the things that you need to think about are the story behind your gamification, the incentives that you're offering, or those rewards, and that you actually have a focused message. One of the other surveys that happened says that 46% of companies that have some sort of program that does leaderboards or pointing or anything like that does not offer any sort of incentive for good behavior. They punish for bad behavior. They use the stick, as we talked about earlier today, but they don't give a carrot for good behavior, which, as we talked about in the keynote this morning, the carrot is actually much better than the stick in this case. So that is where the kind of what needs to be thought about on top of all of those things. And we bring up story because story is what actually helps motivate people. If you do not have some sort of story to go with your games, most people become disengaged with that story. So we're going to talk about some of the data and the science behind these things. So we're going to start with talking about motivation. Now, if I would have divided up this room at the very beginning and said, this half gets candy, or insert reward here, and this half does not, would people have picked a specific side of the, raise your hand if you would have picked a specific side of the room based on knowing that information. Okay, and I'm guessing most people can tell me it's because you get the reward, you get the incentive that goes with it. Would anyone not have changed their mind about where they sat based on that information? Why would you not have changed your mind? Just not motivated? Yeah. Did someone else raise their hand about why they wouldn't change sides? Same thing, just doesn't matter. So yeah, so that is kind of what the statistics show, is that not everyone is motivated by rewards. It is a large percentage, and that percentage is around 68%. So between 68, 70% of people find that gamification or rewards actually do motivate them more to participate in your security awareness training or within educational material in general. So not just security information, but games and educational materials in general. So we can break that down a little bit and talk about gamification does increase motivation. So this came from, again, these different studies. Gamification does increase motivation. What it does not directly increase, though, is performance. So performance, like we talked about, is how well you do at the quizzes, how well you do with long-term retention. So it does not directly impact that performance. Motivation, though, does impact performance. So through math and transitive properties, you can get from gamification to motivation, and then from motivation to performance. So there's a nice kind of track there that passes through all those different kind of phases as part of the process. Looking at different motivations by elements. So as we talked about, you can see down at the bottom, points, leaderboards, course maps, things that are unlockable, levels, aliases, feedback, achievements. Aliases and avatars are kind of very similar things. You can see by each of these elements which ones cause people to be more motivated, to be less motivated, or kind of just, it doesn't matter either way. So applying points, simply applying points to your material and giving people scores or like working towards levels, you can see how much that increases people's motivation to do these exercises in education in general. So you're looking at, close to 75% of people find simply assigning points to something to make it more motivating to do that thing. And you can see, like I said, the different, does anything up here look surprising to people? Like they wouldn't have expected a certain aspect of gamification to be motivating towards people or not motivating towards people? Just curious if anyone's surprised by anything. No? Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that the achievements and the unlockables do have kind of this larger negative impact, because it is, it's kind of what we see most in the like video games and stuff like that is, you got a fun little badge for this thing or that thing. Anything else? It's interesting to me too how things like a course map, so like simply laying out where you're going in the future actually has, an over 50% motivational, people were saying that it's really motivating to just know where you're going rather than having to be, kind of in the mud and in the weeds and stuff like that. I was also surprised by, which one was it? Oh, like aliases and avatars. Simply being able to customize your avatar that you have as your profile picture increases people's motivation. 50% of people find that to be more motivating when it comes to some of these things. So it's just interesting things like that from these different studies. The cool thing about this too is, and this was actually a little bit surprising to me, demographically, this was shown to be consistent across different demographics as well. There was no major shifting between age, social status, or anything like that when it came to the statistics around which elements are motivating to people. So yeah, so simply, like I said, simply tracking progress is one of the most important things apparently that you can do according to the studies in regards to getting them to complete training, assigning points to it, and encouraging them to work towards these different goals. Competition's another big one, as you can see up there with leaderboard. I think the current is supposed to be current ranking, kind of up there with leaderboard, where simply having people compete with each other really motivates the human brain to want to do more for your organization and to retain and motivate you to do that. Let's talk about performance. So I took a risk. I did the live demo thing. We're going to try this live demo thing to see if it works. We all know the stories behind live demos. They never quite go as planned. So hopefully this room meets the statistical average and doesn't screw up my presentation with my live demo. So let's go back to that story that we talked about. Does anyone remember which of these letters was the suspicious thing about Jake's email from the story earlier? So we're going to do hands. Was it A? Does anyone remember if it was A? B? Great. C? Or D? Okay, great. Everyone got it? It was B. There was a misspelling in the company domain in the email. Now this next question, this worked with my group of friends at home when I beta tested this. Let's see if you all fit the statistical averages or not. How many years have I been in cybersecurity? This was from a very early slide in the presentation. Let's just see if we remember. We're going to do the hands again. Let's do A, B, C, or D. Okay, so statistically, this group remembered when my friends at home did not. What? But what this could have demonstrated and what we were trying to get at is that stories actually connect better with people than just giving straight facts. Obviously, this is a very short presentation. Security awareness training and other training can be hours long at a time. So you're right, I probably do need better friends if they can't remember 5 to 10 minutes prior when I'm giving them the test run for a presentation. But that is what's important here, is talking about stories. Those stories are what actually engages the brain to remember things both short-term and long-term. So it's important that you use those stories, and like we were talking about this morning too during the keynote, the stories need to be relevant to your organization. If you are, the example this morning, or there was a presentation this morning talking about, not during the keynote, but if you are doing your tabletop exercises and you're talking about zombies and aliens, you may not be hitting the nail on the head when it comes to getting people to engage with your presentation or your security awareness training. So making sure things are tied back to your organization and making sure that they are just very relevant. But you can still tell stories with relevant data. You can still, like our short little story about Jake, earlier with that is a story that you could tell to help people engage with the content versus just saying, don't click on the phishing email, it's bad. Which I know some security awareness training does do these days, because some are just trying to get that data across rather than caring about how it comes across. So let's talk about short-term retention and getting those quizzes and that immediate kind of burst of knowledge into people's heads. Let's talk about long-term retention. So some companies use what's called a fish-prone score. How often are you, or how likely are you to click on, as your users to click on phishing training? This specifically comes from a study done by KnowBe4, one of our well-known phishing training companies. You can see based on company sizes, when there's no training, and then 90 days after training, and then 1 year after training, that those scores start to decrease. KnowBe4 does claim to use some sort of gamification in their process. Yeah, we're going to take that with a grain of salt based on what we've kind of seen about some of the information previously in this presentation. But they do show that just based on your training, using ongoing training and using some elements, you can significantly decrease your, in this case, your percentage of clicks when it comes to security awareness training. And specifically in this case, phishing emails. This was done from a study in the education industry regarding specifically gamification across multiple studies. You can see the different lines. The dashed lines are non-gamified versions. The solid lines are gamified versions of the same workshops, so the colors match up. And you can see that over time, for both workshops, Workshop 1 and Workshop 2 that they held, over time you do lose retention of information. It's inevitable, you're always going to lose retention of information. However, you do see for both of the workshops that the gamified versions, more information was retained, in this case over a 14-day period, than their non-gamified versions. So there's a lot of information out there in these studies talking about how these things do help with the retention of information. The orange one, you are starting to get really close between those two, but it's still, after 14 days, still significantly higher, enough to have it noted on the graph that it is technically higher. So this is just to show that long-term retention is also seen to improve with gamification techniques used. Some of those ones, like we talked about, points, leaderboards, and all those different things. This was another study that was done, just a very simple graph. Over time, another workshop where there was an assessment done, or a couple assessments done, and then final marks for this class. I forget what the class was specifically. Did I note what that was? I did not know what the actual class was. But you can see that, again, the gamification version of this class and the average grade of this class stayed higher during the gamified version versus the non-gamified version. So all of this to say, it just comes to show that using some of these techniques gets people involved in the process more, and therefore they want to retain the information, they want to use the information, and it just keeps the human brain engaged throughout those processes. So how should we be thinking about this going forward? So, I've presented the science behind it all, the studies that show that it all supposedly works, but then how does that apply practically to, us in our industries and as we go out into the world for this? One of the biggest things that was talked about in all of the studies that I read and everything else that I was reading on gamification and have experienced myself in gamification is planning. You need to have a solid plan when you go into your gamification. You need to know what elements you're using, why you're using them, how you want to use them. If you don't have that information, the program is as the statistics have shown, doomed. There's a lot of studies where people didn't plan ahead. They just thought they could just throw out these things. They could do scores. They could create leaderboards. And those programs lasted less than 6 months usually before people just stopped engaging with them, or they didn't, no one found them to be worthwhile to engage in with the company. You can build or buy. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of platforms for gamification outside of sales right now. Sales is where this has really been piloted as a motivator. So people that are trying to sell equipment or sell whatever to companies, this is where this has really taken off to begin with. And this is where a lot of the research can be based. And a lot of the products are based around selling things. So there's not a lot of options to buy platforms right now, unfortunately. Hopefully, I've seen some open source projects coming out recently that are more focused on this, but it may be something that you have to kind of build internally to your organization using your LMS platform, your learning management system, or other tools that you have available to you. Your implementation. And most people probably recognize this process. This is a pretty standard platform build-out process, as talked about in many different certifications. So your implementation of this, whether you build or buy, again, stick to that plan. If you start deviating from the plan, you can start running into issues. You need to maintain it. So one of the biggest things that people said, I forget what the statistic was, I think it was close to 70% of people said that after their companies put in some sort of gamification platform that had storytelling, those stories got stale. Just like all of our security awareness training, if you don't keep it up to date, it does get stale and no one wants to engage with it. I've taken the same security awareness training at one of my companies for the 8 years that I was there. Did not change in 8 years. Same hacker with the red sunglasses and the black hoodie, and we all know the stereotype that goes with the hacker in our security awareness training videos. I did not want to watch it everywhere. Mind the fact that I had to watch them anyways because I was the one deploying the training, but it was still very arduous to a lot of people at the company. So your maintenance, you do need to factor in how to maintain the platform or the stories or the data that is in that platform, because people will stop engaging if you don't continue to maintain it. One of the things that I was reading about the maintenance side of this is how important crowdsourcing can be for maintaining these platforms. I don't think anyone in this room wants to dedicate their full-time job to writing stories about, Jake and his email problems, or trying to think up all of the different scenarios that can go with that. So there's been a lot of talk around community-created security awareness training and security awareness stories and things like that, so that you want to make sure that that data is fresh and new. Okay, so where can we put this? So we've been talking a lot about security awareness training itself. I'm going to open it up again to the floor and talk about where else do people see that this could be put in besides security awareness training into their environments? Where can we introduce gamification techniques into our environments? Does anyone have thoughts on other places?
Reporting an email issue or something like that?
Yeah? Okay, I'll just keep. So the answer is everywhere. I was talking with my father, who is a software engineer of 40 years, and he was talking about how, well, he doesn't get a lot of phishing emails, so why should people get points or incentives if they report their phishing emails? Because he doesn't get a lot of them, but sales does, so why, that would give them an unfair advantage in their system. So if you start embedding these activities into their daily jobs, there's actually a lot of opportunities where you can find those imbalances and actually correct them. So like we talked about the phishing simulations, reporting of those phishing emails. You can do simulations, which everyone gets in your organization or should be getting on a regular basis in your organization. And you can also use ones that are reported by hand. But you can also do things like properly applying data labels. So if you're using a product like Microsoft that has data labeling, not endorsing any specific data labeling product here, that's just the ones that I've used in the past. But if you have some sort of DLP system that can track this, you can use that as a, give people 1 point every time they create a document that is properly labeled. And you can cross-reference that against your DLP solution that's going through and helping them update those labels and things like that. So there's places where you can find this. For the engineering team, this is what I was talking to my dad about, like I said, who's the software engineer. If he submits a PR, a pull request into their code base that comes through with a completely clean security check from their scanners, then he gets some points for that. So if he may not get those phishing emails, but I can tell you those salespeople aren't submitting PRs to go into their code base. So that's these trade-offs that you can find in people's everyday jobs where you can start assigning different things and point values and leaderboards. People do bug squashes all the time, bug bashes and these different things. You can use those as pointing mechanisms or incentives or rewards. We actually did hidden phrases. We didn't do it on training posters. We did hidden phrases in our security newsletter. And I think the first 5 people that found the security, the hidden phrases in the poster or in the newsletter and let us know in security that they found it, I think we gave them like a $10 gift card or something to the place of their choosing. So things like that are important. Clues in newsletters, that was the one that I just talked about. So you can really find places throughout companies to do this kind of thing. For, like I said with the PRs, if you use ticketing, for IT and stuff like that, you can do based on how they close their tickets. There's all sorts of options to do gamification in the daily job outside of just your security awareness training. Because the goal is really to engage people all the time, not just when they are doing their security awareness training. So we're going to jump back to our list of looking at how we deliver training. Across all of these channels, or all of these delivery methods, there are opportunities to do things like pointing and leaderboards and simply giving people a little avatar that they can use throughout their their day-to-day. I know a lot of people require corporate photos. I know companies like Microsoft are starting to introduce your little virtual avatar to go with your little HoloLenses. All of that, though, adds to where this can go. One big thing when it comes to your security-based contests and prizes, statistics show actual physical, tangible items will motivate people more than your soft, squishy items. And what I mean by that is, surprisingly, days off are not as motivating as people think they are. A lot more people would rather have cash in hand or a gift card that is of less value. Yes, Harris?
Would you prefer when 10 people win a $5 item or one person wins a $50 item? More winners for a lower amount or one bigger prize?
Are you asking me personally, or what do the statistics show? Okay, so me personally, I would rather do more people, smaller prizes, personally. Because I think that is more, I don't want to say more motivating, but yeah, I just think that that's, now the statistics, I'm trying to remember the statistics. This was something that came up. I'll have to look that up for you, which one that actually the statistics show. But it is that tangible things get more buy-in than non-tangible things. And with that, I'm actually done with my slides. So do people have any questions, comments, things that they want answered in regards to using gamification in their programs? Yeah.
So, but from my memory, I don't think there's really, like just games. Like, let's say, like just a game you can play, like find the clues.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the training, but not just a game somebody could play.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, am I missing it? Do they have something like that? Or is there certain websites? Is there any websites that are safe?
I don't have any websites off the top of my head. I do know what you're talking about, though, in regards to Know Before, where they do, as part of the training, have little games, but there's not just things that you can play. And again, this is a really new space, gamification and security. It's been really focused on, like I said, sales in the past. And so companies like Know Before have been doing these small little nuggets, but they don't expose that data to you anywhere else. You can't, use them to power other systems or feed other data into it to build out a bigger gaming system. You just have these little point-in-time objects that you can kind of go through. Harris.
One thing I used to do is I always made sure that I would do winners every quarter. And it would be on fish alert button or completing a training or making a report. All sorts of ways people got credit. Every credit got a random draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I always made sure some of the executives would won every quarter. Because by having them win, they love when they push out everybody else. So yes, I did cheat the system. But I was taking advantage of the fact that if the CFO won a bag of Swedish fish and he let everybody in the finance department know, again, it was great publicity.
100%. Yeah, there's definitely, we always, at some of the companies that I've worked for, we had similar, not systems, but similar things happen where as soon as one of the executives, the C-suite, bought into the program, then everyone else suddenly buys into the program. So you do have to, we'll call it sweetening the pot for the executives sometimes to help them understand why these things are important. Because the reason I come up here with all of these statistics and numbers is twofold. One, I like statistics. Two, this is a cost center. This is not, there is no, as people talk about direct, money making in the org.
Because I had a woman in finance and accounts payable who spotted the phishing attempt over several hours as the person is changing domain names. To try to get an ACH transfer changed for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because of the training and gamification, she saved the company several $100,000 by not clicking it and actually letting that go through.
Mm-hmm.
So you can make it a benefit if you are creative.
Yeah, no, so just so everyone knows in the room, Harris and I know each other. He was my professor years ago. This is the banter. Just to make sure no one's he's revenge for all of the time in class, yeah. You're right, that you can create those direct links to saving money, like you said in the case of those ACH transfers. You just have to get there with the story to the executives because they're going to see it's oh, you want me to buy people bags of Swedish fish every quarter, and they're going to be well, that's going to cost me, $100 every quarter. And then so that's a red line on their little balance book and stuff like that. But if you can turn it around and show stories like that, again, that storytelling, you can prove to these people that, and these people, I mean executives, I hope there's only a few CISOs in the room that I might have just offended. These are real costs savings to these organizations.
And she approved the badging system. And to one of the other participants' notes, people who would report actionable legitimate phishing attacks would get a point. There was a point system. We had the beautiful badges. We had a couple of artists in-house. And we designed these gorgeous blue and white badges. And the CEO ran Cyber Command, and everybody wanted to be up there with her. So she led by example.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things is part of that planning phase for the development of these systems is to get your executive buy-in. Because I think with a lot of different security aspects, without that high-level buy-in, you're not going to get anyone else to want to do the thing. So it's really cool that you got your CEO to buy in. Very rare to have the actual CEO to buy into your plans. So, yeah.
So I've had a lot of these ideas and wanting to integrate it into my company, but they feel disjointed, so I don't know where to start. And then after seeing your graph of which of the ones are most effective, I'm like, oh crap. Which one do I pick? So what would your recommendation be for where to start and how to figure out which one will be most effective for your organization?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to that. Let me see if I can go back to that chart and backwards through PowerPoint. It's never easy to do. There it is. So yeah, so the organization that I was a part of when I started researching all of this, we were focusing on building out points and levels first, because that was what we talked with our engineering team, we were focusing on in the first place, because our big focus when we went into this wasn't actually security awareness training. We were focused on vulnerability management. So we were doing a lot of looks around, what do our engineers specifically want? And our engineering team specifically, we kind of did it risk assessment style, where we just met with the engineering leaders and talked with them about, what they liked and what they didn't like. Obviously, much more squishy than a risk assessment is. And they were like, well, I saw on the news this one time where these people were getting security ninja badges, and I wanted to be a security ninja level 3. And it's like, okay, great. We can make these things work for you. So that's where we started specifically, was with points and levels. Now, toning those in is very difficult. You do have to do a lot of research. I spent weeks researching how games do like XP and different experience points and things like that. So those systems can get complicated of like how many XP points before you get to the next level and stuff like that. But that's where we started, like I said, based on what our engineering org was looking for and saying that was motivating to them, which was apparently being a security ninja. Any other thoughts? No? Oh.
Just a thought, you might be able to get some of that point stuff for free. Like password management, like LastPass has built-in scoring systems already. You can just add knockdown rate as some sort of competition for your
Yeah, you can definitely utilize some of those aspects. A lot of systems do have something of that regard that you can pull in through API or other mechanism to utilize that. Okay, if there's no other thoughts, I'll say people can come up and grab some candy to finish off their day. Otherwise, I'm just going to take it home with me and use it for Halloween. Thank you, everyone.